Right, welcome to the, well, I'm going to share my screen, to the 6th. I don't want to share my emails particularly. Also want to share the beginning of the presentation or the end. Sorry, I wasn't ready. To the 6th We Do Wind Diversity Seminar. And Mac, I didn't actually ask you how to pronounce your surname, so maybe you want to tell me before I say it wrong. Alonge?
Alonge.
Alonge. Okay, great. Good. For those of you who don't know who I am, most of you probably do. My name is Sarah Barber. I lead the wind energy program in the Eastern Switzerland University of Applied Sciences. I also run the Swiss Wind Energy R&D Network, and I'm chair of the Diversity Committee of the European Academy of Wind Energy. And this series is a collaboration between all these people. I actually do want to introduce you to Salva as well, my colleague, because he's going to be taking over as the lead person in these webinars starting from the next one. So yeah.
I'm honored. I'll try to do a good job.
All right, thank you. I'm sure you will. So the little plan is I do a quick introduction, and then I give over to Mac, and then we have a Q&A session at the end, and then maybe we have some things we want to define that we actually want to do together. I do actually want to take the guidelines that Mac is going to present and use them in the academy, so maybe there's a bit of time to discuss how we're going to do that as well at the end. Yeah, so just for those of you who don't know, the European Academy of Wind Energy itself is a non-profit organization, basically representing the needs of the European, or actually even the international now, wind energy academic area. So the members are all universities in Europe. We're now expanding to international universities. And we're trying to provide like just an organization to represent the needs of the academy, but also we run a journal. We have various working groups looking at lots of different topics, and so it's quite a cool organization. And the coolest thing about the organization is that they decided to found a diversity committee alongside all the technical committees that they have last year. And so we have a diversity committee now, and our mission statement is that we're committed to improving diversity, equity, and inclusion in wind energy science by A, providing tools to help people improve DEI themselves in their organizations, by B, increasing the visibility of underrepresented groups, and C, acting as positive role models by improving DEI within the academy and our own organizations. And so that's kind of what we're trying to do. We consist of myself and a few people who are here today and a few people aren't. So Jim Gilbert from the University of Hull, I think, is not here. Sarah Fogelstrom from Chalmers in Sweden is here. She's smiling away, as you can see. Julia Gottschall from Fraunhofer, I don't think's here, and Stefan Barth from Forwind in Germany, and Ji Yan from the North China Electric Power University. Did sign up, is here as well. Oh no. Okay, anyway, that's us. We actually have a website. Maybe I'll put it in the chat while Mac's talking. I forgot to put it in the presentation. And then on the other side, we have this thing called We Do Wind, which some of you might be familiar with. And it's just We Do Wind is just a big project where we're trying to get people to work together more. So share data and knowledge, collaborate. We're trying to create safe spaces where people can do that while benefiting mutually. So it's based on this idea of challenges. So we get companies to provide data and challenges, and we get solution developers to solve those challenges and have some sort of mutually beneficial situation. And we've got quite a few challenges running on quite a few technical topics, but the diversity space is also part of it. And what we're trying to do there is use We Do Wind as a platform to collect lots of inputs from lots of different people. So with the wind energy community, but also with anybody. So people like Mac, but also yourselves who are attending. Like, how can we get all these inputs from all these lots of different people and actually find out what you all want? Because I don't think it's really fair for the diversity committee just to say, okay, we know what the needs are, especially because we don't represent underrepresented groups that well ourselves. So we're trying to bring in and give people an opportunity to get heard, basically. And as well as having the webinars as part of this space, we've got an online platform where we, for every workshop, every webinar we do, we create a top discussion topic, and then we put some questions out there, and we try to get a discussion going in that sort of safe space. So feel free to sign up for that. I'll put it in the chat as well. Why are we doing it? So we need diversity to survive. Humans are diverse. Equality is the basis of a fair society. Diverse teams have been proven many times to be more productive and happier. But we have still lots of underrepresentation and discrimination, even when it's unintentional. We have many numbers which are surprising, like 92% of EU tech funding goes to male teams, or 1% goes to Black founders. There's many other numbers which kind of back up this point. There's this thing called the gender data gap that some of you might have heard of, that basically many things in the world are designed by men for men, again, quite often unintentionally. The amount of medical research that gets done on women is depressingly low. Even the resistance to fighting underrepresentation is growing. That picture is just self-explanatory. I still think we've got lots of work we can do, and my opinion, also let's say the opinion of the organisations I represent, every single one of us can do something. That's what I'm trying to sort of communicate here. We can all do something small, and we all should. I think the energy transition is a good opportunity to do something, because we need a restructuring anyway. We've got all these new challenges in the energy transition. We need more people. We need people with different skills. Let's use this as an opportunity to restructure and actually get more types of different people with different backgrounds and cultures into the discussion. So that's it. Results of the survey. So as you know, those of you who all signed up, so you all filled out this short survey. We try to do a little survey every time. We had 23 people taking part. Actually, for the first time, we had more men than women. I think that's the first. On the right-hand side, we have the percentage of answers of yes and no, although can you see yes and no? Yes and no seems to have disappeared. That's a bit stupid. So actually, yes is blue and no, no, that's wrong. I can't even remember now. No, red is no. That's really stupid of me not to have that in there. Is that not in there? I'm going to check on that later. Sorry, that was really stupid. Yeah, no, it's not the same as man and women. I think the red is no. So does your organisation support you in improving diversity, equity, and inclusion anyway? Like, most people don't have any support, but some people know of guidelines for improving the diversity, equity, and inclusion at work. Some people actively use guidelines. Let me check on this yes/no thing, because I'm quite embarrassed by the fact that I don't know that right now. But anyway, that's the results of the survey, which are kind of interesting, just to show, okay, there is some awareness. I also listed some of the replies that people put in, like the existing guidelines. So some people did name a couple of existing tools that they use, different trainings, different internal documents, or even public documents. People did write some things about what sort of support they get now. So their company has a gender policy, or they have some sort of internship programs. They have a women-friendly environment, which is quite interesting. I wonder what a men-friendly environment would be. Or there's a committee for diversity, for example. I don't want to go into that in detail now, because I want to give the space to Mark, but feel free to ask questions about that in the future. Also, we asked what more could be done. So some thoughts that people shared, that the management tends to blame the low diversity in hiring on the few people that are seeking, and not actually looking to see what they can improve themselves. I also did see, for example, a comment where somebody said they can't do anything about it because the pool's too small. And I think, but somebody did write they need to be proactive to diversify their network, which I think is a good point. Somebody mentioned, should we celebrate days dedicated to diversity, but how to promote this without being a so-called white knight? I think these are all really interesting things. Maybe we get to them later if we don't have anything to talk about at the end when Mac's finished. Otherwise, I'll put them into the platform if anybody wants to discuss the points later. But as a general conclusion, I think There are some guidelines that people seem to use, but I do feel like having some sort of accessible guidelines and tools, or even examples of success stories that people have already used, is something that is a need. And so I want to transfer that finding to what we're doing in the diversity committee. And I really do think that what Mac is about to present us with is a concrete tool that we can try to work out how to use together. So with that, I want to transition over. No, I don't. I want to do one more slide. Why do we want to focus on gender and ethnicity in offshore wind? Just a few quotes which come directly from the document that Mac is going to present. That a few high-level people have said the offshore wind sector in the UK needs to do more to attract, retain, and promote ethnically diverse talent in order to properly reflect society as a whole. If we want to attract the best people, we need to expand the pool of talent, which means we need to attract people from diverse backgrounds. And then Mac himself said, the offshore wind sector deal presents a unique opportunity for the sector to embed quality, diversity, and inclusion, or equality, sorry, from the outset. And so with that, I am going to hand over to Mac now to tell us in more detail about what he does and who he is and what the guidelines are. Sorry, I went over time slightly. So feel free to take your full 20 minutes. Yeah, so do you want to share your screen, Mac? In the meantime, if anyone's got any questions, feel free to ask.
Thank you so much. Bear with me while I try to make this work. Okay. Can you see that?
Looks good.
Cool, perfect. Yeah, always a great way to start by being quoted. So thank you for that introduction, Sarah. Yeah, as Sarah said, I've been given 20 minutes. It's quite a little bit of a task to try to summarize 65 pages plus additional context into 20 minutes, but I will try my best, so do bear with me if I speak relatively fast. I wanted to go through a little bit of the content as to how we got here. Rather self-seekingly, I'm going to start by talking about myself and obviously the organisation. It'll give you a little bit of background into how this work came about, and then just talk through some key points from the best practice guide. As I said, it's super difficult to summarize 65 pages in a number of slides, but try to pull out some of the key points. Can talk a little bit about kind of cross-sector working, as I think that's always a good starting point for understanding how we can collectively do better, and then finish off with some case studies, and again, just provide some time at the end for any questions that you might have. I will also say that I'm not precious about being interrupted, so if there's anything that you want to ask or any itching questions that you have, happy to take it on the fly. So do put your hand up or come off mute and shout out. Great. So with that being said, my name is Mac Alonge. I'm the CEO of the Equal Group. We're a diversity and inclusion organisation committed to helping companies on their journeys. I've been operating in energy and utilities for the last 15 years, and the last 5 has been spent specifically focusing on equality, diversity and inclusion. During my time in the sector, I worked for a number of organisations such as KPMG, National Grid, UK Government and Scottish Government, and the lack of kind of diversity in those spaces, especially at senior decision-making level, was quite apparent and did, I think, lead to outcomes that weren't necessarily in the interests of everybody. So as kind of collective consumers of energy, you know, everybody on this earth is a consumer of energy in some form or other. There's no reason why that shouldn't be represented throughout the whole ecosystem of an industry. So that really drives kind of my passion in this space. One of the other observations from, or a couple of other observations from an EDI lens, is kind of a lack of kind of long-term progress, a lack of deep understanding and expertise related to it, which typically led to superficial interventions. And that really guided kind of the establishing of the Equal Group. So as an organisation, we're committed to helping organisations unleash their full potential by identifying firstly and then eliminating bias from the workplace using data and technology. And our vision essentially is to enable a business world without bias. Our approach really starts with data as the fundamental foundation for all of the work that we do. We use this data to identify operational gaps, set strategic targets, and then work to create and implement strategic interventions on either a department, company, or sector level. And then finally, just looking to use that methodology to track progress over time and refine, replan, and repeat what we do with organizations. Picked out a couple of organizations that we've worked with, some of whom you may be familiar with. We're a team of 17 working across different functions, all committed to this journey. So in terms of why I'm here today, really wanted to talk about one of our projects, which was with the Offshore Wind Industry Council. I'm not sure how familiar you all are with OWIC, but essentially it's a cross-industry body, really bringing together policymakers, industry stakeholders to work collaboratively to specific ambitions, which I'll mention a little bit later, targeted at 2030 and beyond. All of that is encompassed in what is known as the Offshore Wind Sector Deal. So in 2019, the UK government and the Offshore Wind Industry Council signed a sector deal which set out a long-term strategy for the offshore wind sector in the UK and really looked at how the offshore wind sector could become a fundamental piece of the UK's energy mix. Three parts of that deal really looked at making sure that the technologies that underpin the UK's power system were clean, affordable and modern, and really looking by 2030 to establish that 30% of UK's power will come from offshore wind. And an enabling factor for all of that was 48 billion that has been earmarked for investment to support 27,000 jobs operating directly in the sector. And to Sarah's point earlier, this is a fantastic kind of initiative, fantastic opportunity to really get ahead of diversity and inclusion, embed that from, I won't say the start, but the earlier days of the sector's evolution. And in order to do that, we worked alongside the OWIC, so the Industry Council, to understand what a best practice guide could look like. And really, it was important to note that although this is a sector guide, it's kind of created in the understanding that different organizations will be operating from different contexts. Some of the players already have an existing footprint in the traditional energy space. Some are completely distinct to offshore wind. Everybody has a different context for this work. So this guide is really aimed at being a starting point. We also sought to address the breadth and totality of the industry, meaning that we wanted to address all parts of the supply chain, understanding that this is quite a vast landscape in which there are different shapes of organizations that all have different considerations. We wanted it to be as practical as possible. So within the guide, you will see numerous examples of case studies and best practice, really designed to bring this from a theoretical document more to a practical guide that individuals can contribute to and really work through. And to that end, this is kind of an online guide. It's designed to be as accessible as possible, designed to be interactive, and really designed to be put into practice rather than being just another publication. I will just copy the link and paste that into the chat. I'm not sure if everyone's been had sight of that already, but we want to do that. Okay, so you can actually access the guide and hopefully you can walk through it either on the call or in your own time. So I really wanted to take a little bit of time to walk you through, as I said, a couple of key areas of the guide. The guide's core is really around 4 areas, which are engagement and attraction, recruitment, retention and progression. So key parts of the typical employee life cycle, and then contextually underpinned by leadership, culture, intersectionality, and data. So leadership is really ensuring that there is a firm commitment from the organisation to work towards greater levels of diversity and inclusion in the organisation, ensuring that the culture of the organisation isn't at odds with a drive for more diversity and inclusion in this space. And intersectionality, hopefully you'll all be familiar with that term, but it's really looking at the extent to which we are considering things in their kind of as holistic a view as possible, rather than being fixated on singular metrics of diversity. And then data, as I mentioned before, is kind of at the heart of everything we do. So when we talk about data, we're not just talking about the quantitative, as a lot of people do, but we're also talking about qualitative measures. So making sure that we have every opportunity to leverage people's lived experiences and how people feel and interact with our organisations on a day-to-day basis. Okay, so in terms of the principles, again, this isn't a standard user guide in the traditional sense of it, but we wanted it to be as practical as possible. To that end, we have kind of created two lenses with which we wanted people to engage with the guide through. One was through the lens of application, so really understanding the content of the guide, understanding that not everything will be applicable to absolutely every organisation. Some of the things some organisations will have done, some will be entirely new, or some will be completely unfeasible. It's also about looking for wider applications, so understanding that some things may not be implementable across the whole organisation, some will be specific to different departments. But really the ethos underpinning the guide is that organisations should look to develop, evolve and innovate with this as the fundamental foundation of that work. And then on the engagement side of things, we really wanted to create a space to encourage people to share their successes, share their challenges, publicise any progress that they had made, and also work alongside credible organisations in this space, all of which is designed to ensure that the user guide is kept up to date and refreshed. So there is on the link, or there should be, a means for organisations to submit case studies, to let us know in real time what's happening, how things are progressing, and hopefully open up a wider debate for how this could have an impact across the sector. Wanted to mention the two. Oops, sorry,
I thought Eleanor had her hand up, but she's put it back down again.
Yes. No, because it's a specific question from the previous slide that I didn't understand. It's really something very specific. If you want, we can discuss later. When in this recruitment, when you say require diverse shortlist and for women aim for balanced shortlist, what does this mean? So if you want, we can take it another time. I just thought that maybe it's very specific, but just okay.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. So in terms of a diverse shortlist, it's really looking across all different lenses of diversity. So ensuring that we've got a different mix in there of kind of people's experiences. One of the things that people often struggle with from a recruitment lens is being very rigid in their requirements. So requiring somebody to have 10 or 15 years of leadership experience really narrows in your pool to say, okay, if we want specifically energy sector leaders that have been leading for the last 10 or 15 years, that typically will be white middle-aged men, essentially. So understanding that there is a need to diversify our requirements, diversify the shortlist that is applicable to any particular vacancy. And then for gender specifically, the balance is looking across male, female, and where relevant, kind of non-binary individuals. Hopefully that makes sense. Great. So I just wanted to mention the sector targets. So,
Okay. So,
sorry?
No, thank you. That I am in the office and someone else is speaking, and that's why I was muted. Thank you.
So sector targets were to increase the level of Black, Asian, minority ethnic representation from starting point of 5% to 9%, with an ambition to reach 12% if possible. And for gender diversity, it was to increase the proportion of women from 16% starting point to 33%, with an ambition to hit 40% if feasible also. So in terms of the kind of two areas that I wanted to focus on in this presentation, finding staff and keeping staff, which are essentially looking at engagement and attraction and recruitment, as well as retention and progression. So in terms of finding staff, companies often struggle in terms of where to look. So it's really about leveraging partner organizations, people that have existing networks. So really leveraging the power of kind of identifying and not necessarily reinventing the wheel, but tapping into what is already existing, being proactive about specialist recruitment organizations. The last 5 years, especially, there have been organizations set up specifically to diversify different kind of contexts, whether that be leadership, whether that be STEM recruitment, whether that be and then from a very entry level position, ensuring that internships, work experiences, apprenticeships, etc., are fair and open for all. Anecdotally, one of the things we found within this sector specifically is that a lot of the opportunities for work experience, placements, and internships are kind of carried out through word of mouth. So ensuring that there's a more robust process to ensure that people have a route in and are aware of the opportunities within. And then from a recruitment procedure perspective, one of the things that we often found is that people look for culture fit, so what individuals will fit into the existing culture. However, we reframe that slightly to ensure that people are looking for culture adds. So what's missing from your current culture? Where are the opportunities for you to ensure that people that come into your organization are adding to and improving your culture rather than just meeting you where you are culturally? Ensuring that there are ways to prepare and educate candidates. So one of the challenges often is that externally people don't necessarily have a good understanding of what that work, what the work entails in terms of the sector. If they are coming from a different sector, a different industry, there's an opportunity to educate them about the journey of the sector, and ensuring that they have full buy-in to the journey that you're on as an organization. Using the opportunity to get feedback from candidates in order to improve your recruitment process, and then in kind of reciprocating that to make sure that you're providing meaningful feedback to candidates who may not potentially be a good fit for you now, or may have been unsuccessful this time, and ensuring that they know where the areas are for them to work on, either for future opportunities with your organization or other organizations within the sector. In terms of keeping staff, so again, looking at progression and retention, one of the things that we found with organizations specifically that were doing quite well with the recruitment side of things is that they struggle to retain staff, and that typically came down to identifying kind of issues with either a lack of progression or an ability to understand where they were and why they were losing staff. So from a progression perspective, ensuring that there were opportunities for greater visibility of talent. It's great to see that you've got that as one of your objectives as a network. Ensuring that there was access to things like reverse mentoring or traditional mentoring, and looking for opportunities both externally and internally. And then also looking at kind of learning and development programs, things like future leaders programs, and ensuring that there was a diverse mix within kind of the cohorts for those programs. In terms of retention, there's obviously a good opportunity to learn about what's potentially going wrong, utilizing exit interviews, ensuring that those are done robustly and that lessons are being learned, specifically when you're losing diverse talent. We also felt that kind of ERGs, so employee resource groups, staff networks, and general safe spaces had a huge part to play in making sure that people felt that they could bring their whole selves to the workplace and had a place to go to if they were feeling slightly disconnected or disillusioned with an organization or a particular department or role. Okay, so that's the guide kind of in a kind of a whistle-stop tour. As I said, it's a 65-page guide, so there are kind of many areas to explore. You will see throughout the guide that there's a number of case studies from organizations that you may or may not be aware of, talking specifically about their challenges. So we've tried to design that to be as informative as possible. So hopefully you should be able to find some tips in there about kind of how you can go about improving your equality, diversity and inclusion efforts. In terms of kind of broader cross-sector working, one of the reasons that we're so passionate about cross-sector working is the opportunity for individual organizations to make improvements, as well as kind of collective efforts in relation to the journey that a sector is on. So looking at individual companies, there's a level of understanding that needs to be carried out in terms of organizations understanding their own need for change, their own theory of change, and also understanding how they can ensure that they are going about that change in a sustainable and measurable way. Looking at particular guidance, again, this guidance document could be a great framework or structure for organizations understanding any barriers or issues that they're facing, specifically in relation to different stages of the employee life cycle. Collectively, it's about understanding what best practice looks like, so exploring examples, exploring case studies of where good results have been delivered through doing things a little bit differently. And then in terms of progress, understanding how progress, kind of how progress stacks up in the context of the wider industry. So being able to really understand and demonstrate where kind of barriers are being faced across the industry versus individual organizations facing those barriers. I just wanted to pull out a couple of case studies before handing back over for questions. So we've done extensive work with the Greater London Authority and the Mayor's Office. They commissioned us to produce 4 toolkits, again, looking at those being as interactive and practical as possible across 4 key sectors, which are the green economy, creative and cultural industries, healthcare and hospitality. To understand what it takes to really improve the landscape and hopefully address inequalities across London's workforce. So those guides will be forthcoming in the next couple of months, and we'll speak to hopefully some of the things that you're thinking about currently. We also run a program with the Greater London Authority, which is called the Design Lab. So that was a program across utilities and infrastructure organizations, specifically focused on taking them on a journey of understanding the barriers to the recruitment and retention of young Black men across the capital. And there was kind of 30 organizations involved from a utilities, infrastructure and technology perspective. Really, that was looking at 2 fundamental areas. So understanding the systems, both practical and kind of ideological, that impact young Black men in the workplace. So leveraging opportunities to talk about race, specifically to talk about intersectionality, also exploring some culture and behavioral insights in terms of microaggressions, bullying, harassment, how that's dealt with, how that's identified from an organizational perspective, and then structurally looking at the tools and mechanisms that need to be in place to ensure that there is a higher level of awareness as to the differences in people's progression and also retention rates. So ensuring that robust data was being collected and routinely analysed, ensuring that people looking at the solutions through the lens of careers and not just kind of jobs, ensuring that there was sufficient mechanisms within key processes such as the recruitment process, but also looking at opportunities within supply chain to ensure that there were multiple touch points for engaging with young Black men in this specific scenario. And then the final case study I wanted to touch on was our work with energy and utility skills. So this is a cross-sector commitment designed to ensure that organizations are being open and transparent about measuring and reporting their EDI data and tracking trends over a number of years. So we're currently in our third year of that relationship, and essentially we've broken that down into 4 parts. So looking at leadership, what leaders are doing in and around equality, diversity, inclusion, and what impact that's having on the landscape, attraction and recruitment. A lot of similarities between that and the best practice guide for offshore wind, retention, and then finally progression. As I said, there are over 50 companies involved. Some of those are kind of household names from a UK perspective. And I think it's important to touch on some of the things that we have really understood through this engagement. So looking at specifically leadership and recruitment, we found that there was poor representation of female leaders, specifically in the power and gas kind of industries. We found that the representation of female leaders was slightly higher within water. We think some of that is down to the relative recency of kind of the opening up of the water market. So there are some parallels there for the wind sector in terms of this being an opportunity to open up to a new demographic of leader. We also found that Black, Asian and minority candidates were being diluted out through the recruitment process. So there was relatively good representation at the earlier stages of the recruitment process, but when we got to the latter stages and also levels of appointment, we found that the representation flipped, and that again just shows the power of collecting that data and really unpicking things from a recruitment process perspective to really identify where within that recruitment process issues are being seen, essentially. So for 2021 and also 2022, focus was on understanding what interventions were having a positive impact on the recruitment of Black, Asian, minority ethnic workers, with also some recommendations there in terms of expanding the scope of measurement across the sector. Okay, so that's kind of it for the presentation. I did understand that there was kind of options to ask questions or anything like that, but do feel free to engage with us or myself directly on social media. I guess I'll hand back over to you, Sarah.
All right, brilliant. Thank you very much. I see it was a challenge to get so much information into such a short talk, but I think the main thing is that we know it exists and we know the basics. So I think that was a really good start. I have a couple of things I want to ask and talk about, but I want to give the floor to everyone else first, because otherwise we'll run out of time. So yeah, does anybody want to ask something? Oh, I want to stop the recording.
Yeah.
You forgot. I asked Saba to remind me because I'm really bad at remembering.
I failed.
So I'm going to stop the recording now.